So, well, welcome everyone to the PDX TUG. Glad you're all here. If you've never been here before, we're a pretty active Tableau user group, and we're obviously based out of Portland, but we have people that join us from all over Oregon, all over the Pacific Northwest, lots of people from Seattle. So if you're all from somewhere else that's not Portland, you're welcome. We're glad you're here, and thanks for joining us. Let me get my computer to unfreeze for a second so I can switch my slide. There we go. Excited for the agenda today. We have two speakers coming from both, actually they're both from the East Coast. So we have an East Coast takeover of the Portland TUG today. The way this is set up is this is just an hour long. At 1:10, which is in 3 minutes, so I better keep talking. We'll have Roshni join us. She is talking to us about containers, and I'll introduce her in a second. And then second, we have Lily Boyce from Condé Nast, and will speak to us about the work she's doing with Condé Nast. And so very excited for both of these. Before we get into them, a little bit more about the TUG. We do this once a month. It's usually at Thursdays at 1 p.m. So that's the time that we got that today. And I think for the rest of the year, we're consistently at that same time. There are 5 of us that lead this TUG. I think all of us are here as panelists. There's 6 months left in the year. And so each of us take our own TUG. And this is the TUG that I'm taking. I set up the content for it. I MC it. And then next month we'll be on to someone else. This provides some diversity of ideas and content. And yeah, so we have the rest of the year lined up except for October. So I don't know if you TUG leaders want to raise your hand and volunteer for October, but that is TBD. But otherwise we're good to go for the rest of the year. And as always, we are looking for ideas for content, or if you want to present, that would be awesome. This is just a good way to get your own personal brand out there, or the company you work for, or simply if you want to hear more about something. It could be any topic about Tableau, or it could be something about more generally about data or data viz. Then definitely, if you navigate to our main TUG page, so I have the URL there, but also if you just Google PDX TUG Portland or something like that, you'll end up here. Our PDX Tableau user group, I think if you Google that, you'll end up here. And then there's a presenter sign up button that's on that main page. And then there it'll take you to a form, fill that out with your ideas or your presentation or yourself. And we'll see that. So I think with that, yeah, we're gonna kick this right off. Roshni is joining us from MIT, and actually she's been here before. One of my favorite presentations last year was by Roshni. She gave a presentation on user testing and how to incorporate that philosophy into your dashboard design and sort of dashboard review process. It was one of my favorite presentations last year, and it's one that I've linked to other people when talking about this concept. So I was very excited to bring her back. This time she's talking about something a little bit more technical and in the details of Tableau. Roshni, I just want to make sure that I know that you sent me a message about your audio not working earlier. Are you good to go now?
I am good to go.
Okay, great.
I hope you guys can see my screen.
Yeah, we can.
Awesome. So I'm just going to get started. I'm going to talk about containers. Containers are a pain in the butt half the time, and then sometimes they do magical things. And I hope that I'll be able to give you some tips that will help you kind of contain, get containers under your belt a little bit. So I'm going to give a little bit of a background. So this presentation actually came out of the higher education Tableau user group, which I'm one of the co-leads for. And it happened to be in March, near the very tail end of March. And if any of you guys know, there's this thing with higher education institutions and March and basketball. There's this big bracket, aka March Madness. Well, can't really use March Madness here because it's not March and you guys aren't all higher ed. So we're going to look at containers, how containers can help us make, put a Tableau together, sort of in this bracket style, using Portland streets. So in the chat. I'm gonna try to copy and paste this link in here. And oops, of course I can't type. All right, there we go. You can also use your QR code, but basically there's a little survey on that thing we call the internet that you can choose your favorite street out of a pair of streets that is shown on the screen here. And if you guys want to spend a couple minutes as I talk, just randomly clicking through and picking your favorite Portland streets, we're going to use the 4 quadrants of Portland, or 4 quadrants, sort of. I don't know, what do you guys call the quadrants? I can't remember anymore. It's been over a decade.
I think we still call them quadrants, even though
Okay.
there are 6.
There's
Right,
6
but
now, yeah.
so just so you know, and I don't know if I've seen it shown an example yet, I put South and Southwest together, and I put Northeast and North Portland together, and the streets that I picked out of the many options are related either to The Simpsons, streets that I remember from my time in college in Portland, or streets that I randomly picked by pointing at a map and saying, hey, what's cool around here? So keep playing this. It just will continue to refresh. In the meantime, I'm going to talk about containers. So this is what the bracket, this is that March Madness bracket. And you can see that there's just a whole bunch of boxes on this page. And this really sets itself up really easily to be put into containers, into horizontal and vertical layout containers that can help you organize the different parts of the bracket. And that's actually what I ended up doing here. I ended up using containers to pull out, the West area and the East and South and Midwest, and then this final 4 in the middle is just it's another set of containers right smack dab in the middle. And I'm going to recreate this with the data that you guys are putting in right now. And some data that I had some friends help me with, some Simpsons fans mostly, and we're going to see which Portland street wins at the end of this. But in the meantime, let's start with some of the tips for dealing with containers. So I will often open up a dashboard. So I'm when I normally add something to a dashboard, I will just like click and drag and put it right into whatever tiled container I'm in, and then I will spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to work around that. And one thing that I found is that if you actually shift click and drag a floating container into your viz, you can actually organize your content a little bit more easily and actually see where things are, and you have a little bit more visibility there. So float first. When you're riding a bike, if you have a flat tire, there's no air in it, it's really hard to ride. But if you have that tire filled up with just the right amount of air, you're pretty much floating on the road. And it's the same situation with containers here. Another thing that I find helpful when I'm riding my bike, I failed to mention that this whole thing was around bikes before the higher ed tug. And then I realized Portland has a lot of bike riders. This presentation was kind of made for Portland. I didn't ride my bike very much when I was in Portland. I think in a single day, I probably outmile my complete college years of biking when I was in Portland. But one of the things I have learned here in Boston is that visibility really matters. If you want to ride as if you aren't going to be seen. And so adding some color to that floating layout container can help you figure out where you are within your dashboard. So just like wearing a vest and having all your lights and all of that stuff on your bike, adding some color, and that's really easy to do. You highlight that container and you add a background color. It can be a really faint color, it can be a really bright color, so in your face that you can't miss it. But it doesn't really matter as long as you can see the edges of the container and see what you're putting into it, because you can end up removing that background later on or changing it to something more useful that fits with your theme a little bit more. Another thing that I find helpful when biking is those placeholders. Knowing where my lane is, even though half the time I am going to take the lane, knowing when there's a detour where I'm allowed to ride or where I should be riding is really helpful. And so these cones are placeholders basically. And in my floating layout containers, I'm going to throw in those same sorts of placeholders. Oftentimes I'll use a text object and just throw that in just so I know where the edge of something is. I might also throw in a blank. So here I've just thrown in a blank container, and I can make that a different color if I wanted to have that stand out as well. So sort of mixing a couple of these tips together. But yeah, having placeholders can really help you figure out what you're doing within your container. The other thing that I find happens is if normally when I go in here, I'll start adding objects in, and they will take up different amounts of room. And sometimes a dashboard, or a view that I want is just going to take up all the room, and then something else I want I can't see. So if I just kept adding things, oopsies. If I just keep adding things to this dashboard, eventually I'm going to hit a place where I can't see or get to some of these other objects. And one thing that I found helpful is if you double click on the top of the container, or to get the outside container and distribute contents evenly, you actually have space for everything. And if you need to expand out this floating container, you can. Same way when you're on a bike rack, right? Like it's easier to put your bike on, lock your bike up if there is space between you and other bikes, and to take your bike out if there is space. So same situation here. We just try to evenly space out things so that it's just easier to handle the different elements that are in your layout container. And finally, signs. Signs are really helpful to help you get where you're going or where you should be going. Things like these bike signal signs, I don't know how many times I've seen bike signals without a sign and not even realize that the bike signal was there. I'm like staring, trying to see the regular traffic light, and somehow, because in Boston these traffic lights are not coordinated well, I'll stick with the road sign, not realizing that I actually have a red on the bike because there's turning traffic that is supposed to have the road. So labeling your containers is similar, like knowing where these things are can be helpful. So here I just have a regular old container, but if I start adding things to this container and start nesting within the container, let's say this is the container that I want for my header. I'm going to type apparently in all caps. I'm really angry at this container. As I move things in here, I'll know, and whoever's editing this workbook in the future, whether it's me or someone else, is also going to see, this is intended for the header. This is intended for the data or for the filters or whatever. I'm just going to make a really quick comment. Sam, I see that you say it just keeps asking you to pick streets endlessly. Yes, it does. That is the magic. It's the ride that never ends until you say, no, I'm done clicking. So you can stop whenever you want to. All right, and so that is actually all of my tips, all of my 5 tips. So let's see how that all plays together. So I'm going to start with this blank sheet. Remember, the first tip is to bring in a, there is no stop button. It's all you. So the first tip is to bring in this floating layout container. And I'm going to go back a little bit just to see what this bracket looks like. So here I'm thinking I'm going to have 4 corners, the 4 quadrants, and then in the middle, something else for the final 4. So let me do that right here. So here is my outside container. I'm going to label it outside. Apparently, I'm not going to uncheck the caps box. I'm going to put in a blank object. I'm also going to put a background on this thing. Gray. I assume it's gray, like the sky in Portland right now, but I have no idea. I probably should have checked the weather before I made that reference. All right, so within this thing, I want, so this is a horizontal layout container. I'm going to want 3 vertical layout containers, one for each of the sections, one for the left, one for the right, and then one for the center. So I'm going to put in a text box in each. I threw two of these things in here. Center, I have this blank object on the right, so I'm just going to put in another vertical right here and put in a text object there that says right. And there we go. So if I wanted to add coloring to this one, I could, to just make it stand out from the others, and so on. So that first step is all about framing it up. At some point, I decided I'm going to just stop and make this outside container no longer floating. And so the easy way to do that is there's this little check mark here. So go from floating to not floating. Eventually, I ended up, adding more layout containers in here. So here, actually, let me show you a really nifty trick. I saw this at, I think in last November's Tableau conference. If you press Control, Shift, and 8, hold on. You can actually expand out the entire item hierarchy that's down here. And so the way I've built this thing out, so I have this big horizontal container in the middle, and then within that, I've got three layout containers, one for west side, one for east side, and then one for the final 4. And then within each of these, again, you see all of these labels that I've put in here. I've said, this is what I want in the northwest one. This is what I want, or this one's going to contain all the southwest and south stuff, and so on. And I've built out all of this layering. So it's Control, Shift, and the number 8. So it's like essentially Control asterisk is what will let you collapse and expand. Actually, just expand apparently. It does not let you collapse. Don't know if that's intentional or not, but Control Shift and the number 8 will let you expand out that entire hierarchy. So over time, there we go. So I created each of these views for each segment. This is old data, so what you're voting is not in here yet. It will be soon. But I created a sheet for each round. So if we look at Northwest round 1, we can see at least at some point in the past. And you know what? I'm just going to refresh this data and cross my fingers that it doesn't ask for a password. But for each round, I created this view that just, has each pairing, and then in orange is the winner of that pairing based on the number of random clicks that were made for that street. Oopsies, I think I clicked the wrong one. My bad. I'm fast forwarding way too much. Wait, you can't see the final yet. No. Just, cover your eyes. Do what Ryan's doing. Cover your eyes. Also, while this cancels, one thing that I realized this morning as I was doing the final touches on this is that there's a lot to learn from the InterWorks and Tableau building more efficient dashboards white paper. I know it's 80 pages. You probably haven't read it, but you totally should read it, because this thing spins like crazy because it is not built correctly. Even though it's a really, really small data set. But that doesn't matter right now. So here's what it ends up being, what this thing ends up looking like. So I have just filled out all of those containers. I've put all of my sheets in, including a label for each quadrant. And then in the middle, I decided to have some labeling here so you guys see what we're looking at. So this is either the PDX Street Showdown or the Burnside Bridge brouhaha. There's no option to vote on that, but we can talk about this in the chat. So I'm gonna just click this little refresh button and we'll see what wins. Let me also, hold on. Oop, wrong button. I want that button up here at the top. Please don't crash. This thing does take like a minute or so to refresh with a very, very small data set. Lots of calculations. Many of them are fixed calculations. If you read that efficient dashboards white paper, you'll find that that's probably not the best plan. So I shouldn't have pressed cancel. While we wait for this to load, if there are questions, we can take them. And of course, I say that and it magically loads. It's like the opposite of a watch pot, right? So there we have it. And I was jokingly saying that I wanted Southeast Woodstock to win. And I did not fix that in any way, but
Are you
look
sure?
at that. I totally didn't. I swear I didn't. I only voted for Woodstock like, I don't know, a half dozen times out of over 200, clicks. So yeah, Southeast Woodstock for the win.
Cool. I see Jack got Lombard Street to the Final Four. He's a St. John's fan. Oh, Lovejoy. I'm surprised. Yeah, Lovejoy and Woodstock. All right. Cool.
So that's basically all I have.
We do have one question in the chat of, is there a way to organize items in the item hierarchy?
So let me cancel out. So what do you mean by organized content? I mean, so the way this is structured is you have your floating items. So this layer that I didn't talk about, as I put a little label on top of some images for the two labels. So those are floating, and those floating objects are always going to be kind of at the top of that hierarchy, or of the item hierarchy. And the order that they're in is the order in which they will show. So if I were to put, well, that's a really bad example because the text is white on both of them. Let's make this text some other random color, bright orange. So you can see that PDX Street Showdown is on top of sort of C, that is on top of Burnside Bridge Brouhaha. But if I switch the order there, that changes. There are ways to do some organization, or at least some copying and pasting. I think web authoring in one of the newer versions of Tableau lets you like copy and paste across different tabs, so you can have some consistency, at least in that context, in terms of how things are organized here. But basically, this like, it really is, it's a container inside of a container inside of a container. So how these things are arranged is all based on how you want it laid out. So if you wanted to, let's say I wanted this Northwest to be underneath, for whatever reason, I wanted it to be on the inside here, you can see that it moves, but there's no way right in desktop to do this. But again, I think web authoring might also have an option to reorder in a newer version. Unfortunately, I do not have that newer version. There's all sorts of cool things that come out in every release. So
well, thank you, Roshni. This is really great. I'm very impressed by the use of the Final Four bracket to showcase containers and how to use them, because that's like a perfect setting for it. And then also like collecting live data. That's very brave of you, and it worked. I'm very impressed.
I made sure that I had at least a few hundred like clicks. I sent this out to a whole bunch of people this morning. I was at like 4 a.m. in my time, and I was like, hey, can you click? Can you click? And I had some people before their morning coffee just like picking some streets, mostly based on Simpsons.
Oh, nice.
So
maybe that's how Lovejoy got in there.
That's probably what it is.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well,
I have one question. There's one question in the question and answer. And it's from Vanessa Wilson. Basically says that sometimes I end up with the annoying blue shaded area at the bottom of the container. Usually I find it's because something has a fixed height somewhere that it shouldn't be fixed. But sometimes it's only seems that I can fix it by removing the container and starting again. Are there any tips?
So one thing that I do is like a lot is just work in the item hierarchy instead of trying to find those objects, because you can actually click through and see, oh, this is fixed with. Okay, if I don't want to fix it, let me undo that. So it's really easy just by right clicking to fix or unfix either the width or the height or whatever it is. Another thing I've noticed, especially with data, is that sometimes that placeholder shows up for some reason that I have not been able to determine in Tableau. But one thing that I have seen that works to sort of make it go away, oops, I did that wrong, is if you don't have dimensions on both columns and rows, it's not able to collapse itself. But if you add just by double clicking and putting in double quotes or single quotes, as long as you're consistent on both columns and rows, and then hiding the unchecking show header, that will actually make that usually it's like a 16 pixel height object, it'll just make it collapse automatically. It's super hacky and I have no idea, like it drives me crazy. I have no idea why that works, but sometimes it works. So that's that.
Okay, thank you, Roshni.
Cool.
If anybody wants
Thanks
to
for
hear,
having me.
yeah, of course. If anybody wants to hear more from Roshni, she mentioned she also runs the higher ed TUG. So if anybody's in that space and wants to hear more, then that's the place to go. And then hopefully one day we'll have you back. Thanks again. Next up, let me share my screen. Next up, we have designing and developing data, data viz at Condé Nast. We are joined by Lily Boyce. She's a senior data viz designer engineer at Condé Nast. I'm excited to have her here with us. We often, this is a Tableau user group, so we often have people from Tableau or others that use Tableau to develop data viz. But obviously data viz extends far beyond Tableau. There's a huge realm out there and there's a lot of overlapping domains, user experience and data storytelling and design and graphic design and all that stuff. Condé Nast isn't a Tableau shop, but they create excellent data visualizations, and Lily Boyce is one of those that kind of leads the charge there on a lot of those. So really excited to have her come and tell us what she knows. And just another little plug, I'm also kind of excited because we have quite the overlap in history. Both grew up in Kansas. We both went to the same university and are both geographers. We both went to the geography program. So some very similar history. So with that, I will pass this over to Lily. And yeah, excited to see what you have, Lily.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me get my screen going for you. Okay. So editorial data viz at Condé Nast. I'm coming to you from Brooklyn, a little far away from Portland, but I'm happy you guys are having me anyway. So basically, I'm going to run through some design projects we've done, give you a little overview of what we do at Condé Nast, how it's different maybe from other places, and then run through a specific project that I'm super proud of that makes for a really good use case and just design process walkthrough. So for anyone unfamiliar, Condé Nast is a huge publishing company. They have a ton of brands doing digital and print magazines. We work across all of them. But this seems like, right now, I think everyone in this field is super interesting because it feels like every single person has sort of a weird winding path to how they got to data viz. It's not like a straight shot. Maybe now that there are some more programs at universities for that, but when I started, there was not. So I started with, like Ryan said, geography program at KU. I spent a lot of time at a nonprofit right out of school doing research writing on agricultural policy, a place where, I'd write these long white papers, PDFs that just really needed some visuals, some interesting pieces of information. We had so much data to work with and we were just doing, paragraphs and paragraphs of text. So I got really into data viz at that point, thinking about how we could incorporate that into our work, doing a lot of workshops and online learning. Some of my favorites here were Edward Tufte, of course, the father of this field. Information is Beautiful. Alberto Cairo does some really good online classes and some wonderful books. With all of that work, finagled my way into getting that title change at the nonprofit I worked for. And with that, there's another little winding path where, someone from LinkedIn found me, nonprofit data viz person, spoke at a conference that they asked me to speak at. Always say yes to that. It opens up so many possibilities. I met my current manager at that conference. She also is presenting from Condé Nast and found it super cool. We connected both in Brooklyn. I started there not long after. It was great little sidewinding way into it. And at Condé Nast, we spent a lot of time in the last, I've been there like 3.5 years. So when I started, we did a lot of our team was mostly focused on internal analytics dashboards. So a lot of like business dashboards, users, subscribers, how the brands are doing, traffic, all of that. Learned a lot of UX, UI in that process, the most important thing I think in this field. And as we were working on those, we also sort of dabbled in the editorial side of things. We've got all these great brands. Let's bring this visual way of storytelling, to the consumer as well. So we've spent more and more time on that, and we've sort of rebranded our team as Data Story Lab. So we work within the larger product design team. We're across all brands at Condé Nast, so we don't work for any specific one, but we sort of work with all of them to create engaging interactive features. So things that are outside of your typical article page or photo gallery, or things that we have, built for editors to easily create content on the site. We kind of go outside of the box and build things that are super bespoke, custom, and interactive. So some things that we've done, this was one of our first projects, creating a sort of visual recipe search. This takes away the search bar and adds icons and shows you all the possible ingredients that you could make a recipe with. This is for an iteration we did for cocktails. So you can choose something that you may have on your bar cart, say gin. I also really like aperitifs like Aperol or similar things. So if you can click gin, see what other combinations are still possible, and then get your custom tailored recipes down below. We've worked with Vogue to do a street style trend tracker. This is something that they were asking for a long time, trying to figure out a way to bring all of their amazing photography into one place. So Vogue is at every runway show ever. There's somebody on the sidewalk taking photos of everyone that attends. And all of those just live in separate gallery pages that are, for a fashionista who wants to come to Vogue and see what's going on in the world of street style. You have to go to like 40 different gallery pages to figure out, if there's any trends there or like what the newest things are. So here we pulled that all into one tool where you can also get a little bit of a pulse on that street style, seeing what cities your search items come up in most. So this is a search for a motorcycle jacket. You can see super popular in Paris. Obviously black is the way to go with motorcycle jackets, but you could also opt for hot pink. So lots of cool things happening there. We created a new visual list for the annual AD 100, which is a list of architecture firms, design firms that is hotly anticipated every year. They usually just do a list with photos and names, but we created more of a visual badge for this one, where it's both filterable, so you can find maybe women-led firms or landscape designers really easily, but you could also just sort of scroll the list and see these fun visual badges based on the parameters for each firm. One more, we just took a simple map for Epicurious. This was part of a larger package on Chinese food and culture, highlighting different regions and how, food from different regions really varies. And so adding just a little bit of animation, hover interaction, making a very simple SVG map into, sort of a fun, delightful experience when you see these little guys move. So that's sort of an example of some things we've done. One project that I really want to walk through from start to finish to show you how these come to life is one that we did for Pitchfork. We started work on this a couple years ago, and they are an online music magazine that does a lot of reviews on albums, artists, songs. They're, very well known, respected / hated in the online world for how they rate different albums. But that means people spend a lot of time reading reviews on their site. It's like their bread and butter. They see user patterns on the site where people will come and read one review and then click to the next review based on artists that are, linked below. But that maybe lasts 2 or 3, and that's only those hardcore readers that will spend that much time. So we wanted to facilitate that rabbit hole experience of discovering artists that you may not think of, and just get sort of ideas for new playlists, think about how Pitchfork is rating your favorite artists, that kind of thing. So starting with just what we knew we could use, what we wanted to go for, we knew we wanted to do some sort of like an input tool, like search for an artist, search for an album, and get something. So something that like is driven by the user, not by Pitchfork. So you can come to this site and like totally customize your experience. So we knew that using the Pitchfork API, we have basically all internal content we can get from our API, like the artist, the album, the rating that they gave the album. Sometimes the genre is available. It's not always tagged by the editor. Pitchfork also does best of lists. So, if they're, best new music or best new release or whatever, that's something that we could also work with. We knew we wanted to use the Spotify API to get similar artists. So they have already a very good algorithm in place. That's how you get all of your daily mixes, your Discover Weeklies are just like similar artists from what you already listen to. And those are pretty successful. So why mess with a good thing? Let's use Spotify. So thinking about how we display these things, we've got year, we've got rating, what kind of axes are we going to use? How like data busy is this going to get? My initial test, my initial inclination for this is a basic scatter plot. You've got year on the bottom, you've got rating on the top. You can see if there's any trends over time that way of like similar artists being, rated higher or lower over time. I mocked these up using a browser tool called rawgraphs. Yeah, like app.rawgraphs. You just like drop in a CSV or copy paste from an Excel and you can get like a ton of different visualizations instantly, which makes ideating and figuring out the best like visualization for different types of data really quick and easy. And you can export as an SVG, which is really great for then putting into a design tool. So looking at similar artists for Lizzo, this is like getting there, like it looks cool. I want to kind of click on it and see what's going on. But there's a lot of overlap. When you look at another artist where there's a lot of overlap, so a lot of similar artists to Childish Gambino were rated really, really high. So you get a ton of things up in the like 8 to 9 range. That makes it like pretty difficult to know what you're supposed to do with this when there's so much overlap. So, showing this to my team and trying to figure out how we could make this a little bit more user friendly. Like, yeah, we got to kill the different sizes here. The ones at the bottom are super small circles and they're already rated on an axis. We're doing double encoding there and actually triple encoding with that color. So it's just like really just doing the same thing over and over again. There's, better ways to do that. So, okay. Back to the drawing board. What if we get rid of that y-axis and just show one axis and then use the color for that second dimension? We could use the genre, we could use their rating, we could use what list they're on. There are lots of different ways we could do that. We could also use the size of the color. Very, very, like a lot of possibilities there. And I think that it's safe to assume that most everyone here is kind of a data nerd, like very excited about all these possibilities. You want to just like show everyone everything and like give the user tons of options, right? You want to give them all the filters. You want to be like, look, you can really spend a lot of time with this and like dive deep. So these first iterations here, I gave them arrange the chart by date or rating. So you could rearrange this. This one over here is by rating. So you just see the blobs, from 0 to 9. These ones over here are rated by date or arranged by date. So you can like switch that around. You can change the color to the genre, to the rating, like so many things here, so many different colors for genre, rating, whether they're on a list like best new album or best new reissue. I was super excited about this. I was like, look at all these colors. Oh my gosh, look at all these options. This is so exciting. And at this point, we took this Figma mockup to user testing. So we actually brought in people to the Condé Nast office to play around with this. Avid Pitchfork readers got like a little sneak peek at this tool so we could see how people who had never seen this before would react to it. I've been working on this for like weeks at this point. So stoked. The design's perfect. Like, come on, it's like ready to go. And then the users are clicking around and they don't even realize that there are filters at the bottom, because I wanted to make sure that visualization was like that first thing you see, just so like impressive, exciting, but they didn't even know to scroll down to see those filters. So that completely ruins that like whole experience right there. So from that, we knew we had to put the filters at top. We also knew that the colors were just too much. People were like, why do the colors change? Like, why are there so many different options here? I don't really know what I'm supposed to do with this. Like, there's just so much going on. Another thing that was really important during user testing was the wording that we used for different results. So we have a UX writing team at Conde, which is such a blessing. It is such an important part of the design process. Basically, there are just so many situations that can arise from this. So maybe the artist you search for, we don't have any reviews for, or maybe we do have reviews for that artist, but for no similar artist. So what do we show? And what do we tell the user what's going to happen? We had all of these different edge cases written out, which come in this, right under the search bar there. You can see exactly what's happening. We also needed to figure out how we were going to explain that Spotify was the one creating these similar artists. We didn't want people to think that Pitchfork was deciding which artists these were, because people get very touchy-feely about Pitchfork's decisions and don't really want them making those decisions for you. So we had to be sure that people were very clear that Spotify was the one doing that, and like that it wasn't any sort of like creepy, malicious, like user data situation. So that was, all of these went through like multiple iterations until we landed on something that felt right. So we ended up then, from that user testing, from our UX writing practices, coming up with the Reviews Explorer. So I'll tell you how it works. Let's see. I think I can see the chat. Yeah. Somebody throw in their favorite artist into the chat. Duster, never heard of that. I'm so sorry. Let's see. Duster. Oh, lots of results. Look at that. 56 albums from both Duster and 15 other artists. So here you can see a pretty good between about 5.5 up to 10. My Bloody Valentine, Pitchfork Loves. You can see the rating for each one of these, which album it was. You can see highlighted the other albums by the same artist. So only 2 by this band, but you could see tons by the Microphones. You could also switch this to date. Because we're using our content API, this was published about 1.5 years ago, but we can still, like, anytime they write a new review, this will just automatically be pulled in. So we've got, a dynamic chart here that just updates when they add content on the back end. We can also see which albums were best new music. So these are just, when you do it by rating, interesting. A lot of these 10s, not best new music, but maybe they were released before that happened. So yeah, then we've also got, the whole list down below. So you can see, if you just want to scroll and see who all is included without hovering over everything, you can do that and just sort of build up a playlist based off of new artists that you may not know. I see Frank Ocean in the chat. That's a good one too. Very highly rated for people like Frank Ocean. But then I love this so much because you can just see these outliers so clearly. There's a huge dislike for this album by Childish Gambino. And they hated Mac Miller from 2011. So I might click on this and be like, why did this get a 1? Who wrote this? And like, why did they hate it so much? But then there's also some really highly rated ones that maybe I didn't listen to as much when it came out. So I want to click on that and, go to that review and see what they had to say about it. So let's see here. For those who are a little bit more code inclined, I'll show you a little bit of how we built this. We build all of our things in D3 and React. So, well, not always D3, but we always use React apps on top of our CMS. And we use pieces of D3 to make the visualization easier for us. So D3 is a visualization library in JavaScript, and there's a lot of nice little built-in functions like time scale, linear scale. It does the math for you so that you can have this dynamic axis that changes without you having to worry about it. This is the entire code for our bee-swarm chart. This is using a D3.force simulation, which is just a really nice out of the box. It creates the all of the physics that put those dots together. We give it an X and a Y. We give it this collide, which gives it the right physics for how far apart we want those to be. And then there's just a couple little things like simulation.tick, just like a standard D3 function that just pulls that all together. Yeah, pretty simple, also complex, but D3 makes it pretty easy for these types of things to come to life. So yeah, that's all I had. We've got some time for questions. So I love to hear from you guys. If you have any questions about any of this, anything we do, throw it at me.
Any questions for Lily? So I've already discovered like 10 albums now that just in this talk that I'm going to go home and listen to. Well, I am home. I'm going to listen to later.
Awesome.
But yeah, I love the Visualization Explorer that you have here. Also, just seeing the whole process. And I think a lot of us have gone through this where we land on what we think is good and what makes sense, and it's because it makes sense to us. And then when you bring it to a wider audience, in this case, it's great that you were able to get a bunch of actual Pitchfork readers and get their opinion. And then you learn that the colors needed to be changed and the filtering thing wasn't working quite the way you thought it was. And it's just that's such valuable feedback. And I feel like in this TUG, we run into that over and over again about the importance of actually just sticking these things in front of the users. So I really appreciated just hearing your whole process here and how this was made. It's really fun. And
yeah, we're super lucky to be able to do like true user testing. This was the only time that we like brought in actual people from outside the company to look at it. And that just turned it into such an amazing product because of that. Most of the time we don't have access to like bringing people in, especially in the last couple of years. But, even just sending it to coworkers that are on other teams that aren't working on this, just being like, hey, take a look at this. Like, what are your thoughts? Is the most valuable thing for the design process.
Yeah. I had a couple of questions in here. A question about D3. If you were new to D3 and wanted to figure out where to learn more about it, do you have any suggestions?
Yes, let's see. Mike Bostock is the writer of it. He used to work for New York Times, and he's written a lot of documentation around it. Also, Scott, I think his name is Scott Murray, wrote like an O'Reilly media book, which is like they have a lot of technical walkthrough books. I remember getting a lot out of that one. First learn JavaScript, because it doesn't make any sense if you don't know. I tried to learn D3 before I knew any code, and I was just like, what is this? So yeah, starting with like, I really liked, I think either Code Academy or Free Code Camp. Free Code Camp's pretty good for just some like walkthrough like practices and like practice projects that really like put it into practical use. But yeah, Scott Murray's book, that's all I can think of off the top of my head.
That's pretty good breadcrumbs for someone to start with, so thank you.
Yeah.
Another question from David. Do you have an in-house process manual or template for your data visualizations that goes across the magazine brands or outlets?
Good question. We are constantly working on documentation. We're a team of 6 with 2 designers. So the design process is, you know, all up to me to write that down. Yes, we're working on it. Continuously updating, it's a living document, but basically we take what we learn from each process and incorporate that in for the next one. So thinking about like when we get data from the brands, that's always like a big thing. Like they always want to get it to us as late as possible because they want time to work on it, but we need it early as possible so that we can test with it. So figuring out those things at the beginning of a project, making sure those expectations are set. Those are some of the biggest things. And yeah, we do have some processes in place. Yeah.
Another question, you mentioned something called raw graphs. The question was, what is the visualization website you suggested? Raw graphs question mark. So
I think I'm still sharing, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It is raw graphs, app.raw graphs. Yeah, it's an awesome site. You just like paste data here, or you can use their test data, edit it if you need to, and choose a chart. You just choose whatever chart you want, and it shows you what that looks like. So you can like really quickly visualize what you want to see. And then just drag and drop your dimensions, and you can do some quick little customizations here just for width, height, color, that kind of thing, and export it. I always export as like an SVG or PNG so that I can use it in a design tool, but it's just really great for like initial iterations.
okay, so you use this, you stick this into prototypes, and then that kicks off the design process. It's a really great idea.
Yeah, it makes the prototypes and the mock-ups like just feel so put together, because it is using real data, and it is like actually what you're proposing it looks like.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Another question from David is, when you're, I guess this would be like in the website development part of this, but do you have access to the entire Condé Nast photo catalog when you're coming up with assets?
Yeah, every employee does. We've got this like internal photo repository basically that just is everything. It's so cool.
Well, because the brands in their Condé Nast feel like everything. It's amazing, like just going through the brand list. I'm like, I can't believe these all are Condé Nast. Yeah. Wired
Yeah.
Magazine's my favorite, by the way. I just want to throw that out there.
Oh yeah, they're pretty cool.
Yeah. But okay, well, we are at the top of the hour, and so I appreciate Lily, you coming to speak with us on this, and you know, joining us out here in Portland. And yeah, it was great. And then same for Roshni at the beginning, talking about containers. Appreciate her as well. And yeah, if you have any, I think Lily is probably okay if people reach out to you if they have any specific questions about what you do.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And I'm also gonna put there we go. Oh wait, that wasn't to everyone. Here you go. Our
yeah.
website, we have a public portfolio website that you can go and see the things that I showed you today and click around on them.
Yeah.
So copy that before the Zoom's over.
Yeah, highly suggest, going into this website, clicking around. There's a bunch of fun stuff on there. I was putting together yesterday Thanksgiving recipes, and it's not even Thanksgiving, so I was having a great time.
Really planning ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I know. But okay, thanks everyone. We'll see you all next month. I don't know how many, Jack, if you want to give me to give any spoilers, but I know that we maybe have queued up someone from the Trailblazers, so that'll be pretty exciting. And so
you spoiled it.
I spoiled it. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. But anyway, I'll see you all next month, and thank you again, presenters, for presenting. So
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Bye.
All right, thanks y'all.
See y'all in August.